We'll start with the Armenian prayer. Please rise. Հայրներ, որ հերքինս ես, Սուրբ Եղեցի անուն քո, եկեցի արքայություն քո, եղեցին կամ քո, որպես հերքինս եւ երկրի ըսած մեր հանապազոր տուր մեզ այսօր, եւ թող մեզ սպարտիս մեր, որպես եւ մենք թողում մերոց սպարտաբանած, եւ մի տանիրս մեզի փոթություն, այլ փրկյաս մեզի չարե, զիքոյ արքայություն եւ զորություն եւ փառք հավիտյանս հավիտենից, ամեն։ When John learned about the ominous nature of his illness, he asked himself, will I have time to write my book? But John's book was already written in his countless essays, columns, speeches, academic papers, and personal letters. It carries a powerful message of service and civil national discourse, empathy and compassion, faith and virtue, love and hope. One of John's deepest desires was and is to see his community strong, vibrant, and connected. And that is why we are here today. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much, Rozan. Hello, everyone. My name is Khachatryan. I'm the president of the Vahe Foundation. We're very glad to see you all here today, this afternoon, as we celebrate together the legacy of John. It's been about 5 years since John's passing. With the shock and dismay of the knowledge that John is no longer with us in person, that he is with us in spirit, the fact that he is not with us still causes shock and dismay. It does not subside. As my colleagues and I were preparing the material for this event, putting this event together, countless times we find ourselves just shaking our head in disbelief. How could this happen? How could it happen that one of the most promising stars, one of the most promising children of the Armenian nation is no more? But as I said, John is no more only in person because his legacy lives on. His spirit lives on. His work lives on. We're fortunate to know John. We know him through the Vahe Foundation, of which John Aroutiounian was a scholar. As very many of you know, he studied at Columbia for his bachelor's and then went on to Yale for law school. I'm also an alumnus of the Vahe Foundation, as are my colleagues here with us today. We spent countless evenings waiting till the night under star-filled sky at some unknown village in Armenia, talking about the matters that matter. Philosophy, society, history, truth, values. John was a true intellectual and a true gentleman, and a staunch advocate for truth. In 2018, when we found out that the Vahe Foundation would no longer be offering scholarships, a group of Vahe alumni came together and established the Vahe Foundation in order to continue the mission of Vahe and to rise it to a new level. It was in May of 2019, during a meeting of the board of Vahe Foundation, when we found out that John passed away. An audible gasp was heard on that Zoom call that afternoon. And it was then and there that we decided, as a collective, unanimously, that all of the scholarships that we would award that academic year, 2019-2020, would be in the memory of John Aroutiounian. And we went further. The following year, starting from the 2020-2021 academic year, we established a special John Aroutiounian Scholarship for service to humanity. And since we've awarded 4 additional scholarships in John's memory, I'd like to give you a brief overview of our foundation, but especially the scholarship, especially since we have one of the scholars amongst us today. So Vahe, just like Vahe, pursues a mission of supporting Armenian youth achieve educational excellence with an academic and a professional commitment to Armenia, the Armenian nation, and humanity. Our primary means of doing this is the scholarship, the Vahe Scholarship, in which we have 4 types. The General Reese Scholarship, which knows no restriction in terms of field of study, so anyone can apply. The John Aroutiounian Scholarship for Service to Humanity, about which I'll speak a bit more in a moment. We also have the Armenian Studies Scholarship, which is dedicated to the pursuit of Armenian studies, especially studying the correlation between Armenian civilization and humanity. And we also have the Engineering Scholarship in Armenia, which is for studying engineering and related fields at a university in Armenia. But I want to focus on John, because this event is about John and his legacy and work. The John Aroutiounian Scholarship for Service to Humanity is awarded to a deserving scholar with a demonstrated commitment to ethical leadership and serving others in one's community with compassion, kindness, and humility. Compassion, kindness, and humility. Serving others in ethical leadership. This is what John stood for. Over the past years, we have awarded 36 scholars with scholarships, studying at 20 universities in 5 countries. You can see all of them on our screen. But more importantly, I'd like to introduce you to the John Aroutiounian Scholars. Starting from the 2020-2021 academic year, the first year it was awarded to Daniel Mikhailian, who, like John, went to Columbia and is currently pursuing her JD at Harvard Law School, pursuing JD just like John was. We have Mane Mirijanian. She is in the audience today. Mane, please stand up and be recognized. Great to have you. Mane completed with excellence her studies in business analytics. She's local at the University of Southern California. She's currently working in the Bay Area at a top data analytics firm, multinational. 2 years ago, we awarded the scholarship to Anna Hovsepian. Last year, to Anna Hovsepian. She's studying PhD in law at King's College London, and she is pursuing her studies in the field of AI, and particularly deepfakes, working towards protecting our privacy against deepfakes. And this year, we awarded to Shushan Victorian, who's pursuing her master's in social justice at the University of College London, and her field of study is eradicating inequity in education, particularly given economic circumstances. As you can see, all of them, through their work and their studies, continue what John stood for. And this is very important for us. This is just one drop in the bucket of how we can keep John's legacy alive. And with that, we invite you to build this organization together. We invite you to join us in keeping John's legacy alive. If you would like to donate, every dollar that is donated to Reese Foundation today will go to the John Aroutiounian Scholarship. So that together we work to keep this scholarship going year after year. Previous years, the first year was $2,000. The last 2 years it was $3,000. We hope to increase it to $5,000 in the coming year, 2024, and so and continue as follows, to increase it year after year. We have the QR codes on your chairs if you'd like to donate, or please stop by. Myself, Vartan is also with us today. He's a member of our board. Vartan, please stand up and be recognized. And so is Anand at the corner. Please ask us about how you can support, and we really, really appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Here at CNN, of course, we bring you breaking news first, often. Now the first you've heard of this story. The readers of Time for Kids, the student edition of Time magazine, have picked their choice for this year's Person of the Year. And here, with the exclusive announcement, John Aroutiounian, an 11-year-old reporter for the magazine, and its managing editor, Martha Pickrell, both live from New York City. John and Martha, good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, John, we're going to put you to work. We're going to cue the drum roll.
All right.
All right. Time for Kids. Person of the Year for 2004 is?
The American Soldier.
All right.
For a second consecutive year.
Now, explain to us why you think more kids pick that than the other choices.
Well, especially in this holiday season where soldiers are working abroad, are fighting for freedom abroad, picking them as the Person of the Year is a way of showing our gratitude and thanks for their service.
Even though that was the same selection as last year.
Yes, well, they're still fighting this year, and we still need to show them appreciation this year.
What were some of the other choices? Well, great choices. John, real quickly, you've been a Time for Kids reporter for about a year. What's been the coolest part, the coolest assignment that you've had?
Well, I like coming on and doing broadcasts here. And I've also had I also interviewed Sarah Jessica Parker and Carolyn Kennedy Schlotzberg, and they were very fun to interview. And then I had an article which went on timeforkids.com.
Well, good work. You hang on to that, and you give us a call in about 10 years. We'll set you up with a CNN internship.
Sure.
All right. John Aroutiounian and Martha Pickerel from Time for Kids magazine, thanks for breaking the news here on CNN Live today.
Thank
Our
you.
pleasure.
Your next candidate is John Aroutiounian.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What an honor it is to be here in front of all of you tonight. My name is John Aroutiounian, and I'm running for KYA governor because I believe in the spirit of Kentucky. I'm running so we can make our Commonwealth better than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, we have pressing issues that need to be addressed in Kentucky. I believe in creating a healthier state, eliminating CATS testing, and preserving green space here at home. As the saying goes, ladies and gentlemen, we have nothing to fear but Ronald McDonald himself. Perhaps you've heard of this before. Perhaps you haven't. If you haven't, it's because I made it up. But that's not the point, friends. The point is that as Kentuckians and as the future, we need to be ensuring the health of our people first. That's why I propose creating a statewide health savings account so people can save money and get help in buying the health insurance they desperately need. Now, I like McDonald's just as much as the next guy. Some, big nice Big Macs and apple pies. But if we're going to improve healthcare, we need to make sure we're doing some caring for our health on our end, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's move on to CATS testing, folks. Where do I even start with CATS testing? Portfolios, on-demand writing. Not only are these tests annoying, but they don't work in assessing knowledge. What we need is a simple test. I call it the simple solution. Eliminate CATS, let teachers teach because Kentucky students deserve better. And now, my third point is green space. So let's talk about green space. When I was a youngin', about yay tall, my father would have taken me out to the local park and say, son, you better love this earth, you better respect it, you better care for it. This message is really applicable here today in Kentucky. Why? Because we're experiencing rapid growth. Whether in the central region, or Russell, or Pulaski, or Wildcastle counties, or beautiful Casey County, and everywhere in between. It's vital that while we grow, we do not destroy our beautiful landscape, ladies and gentlemen. These are my core issues, and I hope to get a chance to talk to each and every one of you about the issues which matter most. Because when it really comes down to it, folks, this election is about who will listen best to the needs of the people. And I mean, look at these things, they're huge. Tomorrow, vote for the candidate whose name you can't pronounce. Let's get Kentucky moving again, KYA. Thank you, Kentucky, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your governor, John Aroutiounian.
Thank you, it is my honor and privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the 64th annual East Senior Dear Kentucky Youth Assembly, and I now call this conference to order. Good morning, teachers, friends, family, officers of the Senate, and welcome to the closing ceremony of this, the United States Senate Page Class of Spring 2010. My name is John Aroutiounian, and I have had the honor to serve as the president of the student body during our tenure here this semester. It has been the experience of our lives to get to work in the United States Senate, meet incredible people each step of the way, and most importantly, to make friendships and bonds that have transformed us in ways we will only much, much later comprehend. We are grateful to so many who have been responsible for getting us to this point. Parents, teachers, friends. To you all, we pay an enormous tribute here today, and I am deeply humbled to be in the presence of all of you. Once again, welcome, and thank you for coming from near and far to be part of this ceremony today. I hope that you enjoy the celebration, and at this time I would ask that if anyone has any electronics, that they turn them off at this time so we can enjoy the celebration. Thank you very, very much. I'm so honored, thrilled, and I think appropriately just a little intimidated to be among so many of the sort of brightest minds out there in the United States here on Nantucket right now. I'm John Aroutiounian, and as Tom mentioned, I'm the speaker of the Yale Political Union at Yale University. It's one of the oldest debating societies in the United States and is the largest campus organization at Yale. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that the Yale Political Union, as Mr. Scott and Ms. Brosnan saw it, can't really exist in real life. You know, you can't have ideals and notions detached from their consequences and from public opinion. It's much too confrontational, and you need some sort of dressing, some artifice. But the current situation can't really exist either. We don't care what you think, the YPU is fond of saying, but that you think. Our structure is fine. It's one of the best in the world. It's hard to imagine a better one. But it's not hard to imagine a media more focused and less repetitive, because media, after all, isn't just a channel for conveying information. It actually affects what it's conveying. It affects the people that it's bringing to you. I have found that at Yale and just about everywhere else in America, you can't make everyone care. You just can't. But you have to convince people that they can do big things. And big things require a community's, every single voice in that community. Our ideological battles, it's an interesting thought that our ideological battles are really smaller than they've ever been before compared to 50 years ago. Existential threats are gone. Communism is gone. Segregation is gone. But it seems like our battles are louder than they've ever been before. How does that make sense? We have less to battle over, but then they're louder than they've ever been before. It doesn't make sense, and I think we can change it together. If you're ever in New Haven, please come and visit the Yale Political Union and see what we do. I think that through more confrontation, we can actually come to a point where we have more compromise and more things actually getting done. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm John Aroutiounian, and I'm a senior in Jonathan Edwards College. I'm a double major in ethics, politics, and economics, and history. This summer, with the generous support of the Macmillan Center, the International Security Studies Program, and the Bates Summer Traveling Fellowships, I was able to spend a summer researching economic development and political accountability in Armenia. It's my last year as a Yalie, and it's sort of hard to believe how quickly these 4 years flew by. I guess if I had to say one thing about Yale, the part of the Yale experience that now as a senior looking back on, and particularly my role as a freshman counselor looking back on, is just how amazing an opportunity Yale gives you to become friends with and to become intimate with the people and the causes you care about the most. We take it for granted at Yale because every day we have opportunities to meet with world-famous diplomats. Every day we have opportunities to meet with friends who are doing amazing things, and it's a place where you constantly feel inspired. But to be able to live in that situation, or to live in that environment for 4 years' time, has been an extraordinary, blessed experience. And I can already tell I'm going to miss it very, very much when I leave at the end of this school year.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlie Goodyear, and I am just one of the people who was involved in the creation, the editing, and then finally the publication of Finding Gold in the Dark. I regret that I was not able to join you all tonight. I'm currently in New Orleans with attending a pre-existing family engagement. But I talked with Ruzan, and I wanted to do my part for tonight's event by just sending you my general reflections on when my path crossed with John and Ruzan's, and my reflections on the journey that followed, the literary journey. So in early 2018, two professors of mine, Charlie Hill and John Lewis Gaddis, came to me independently with a pretty remarkable story. They told me a story about a fellow student at Yale who was about my age, who had been a tremendous writer, an engaged student, a friend, it seems to all, and somebody who had, by all accounts, had a universally positive impact on the lives of those he came into contact with. And they also explained that he was somebody who had departed our physical plane too soon. And obviously that person was John. And Professors Gaddis and Hill wanted to know, given my experience writing books, whether I could take a look at John's writings and just let them know what I think. And now I think John and I had probably been in the same place at multiple points, but we never connected. But the soul that emerged from his writings, I'd never known him physically, but just from a literary perspective, the person that I got to know through his essays, notes from friends, his columns in the YDN, which still make for good reading, and personal letters of his own that were never meant to not only see the light of day, but be read by anybody other than him and the recipient. I was struck by somebody who was compassionate, thoughtful, moral, and I say this in a good way, he was intellect acting under the propulsion of compassion. He was somebody who was looking at the world and its problems and thinking, how can I make this better for everyone? How can I build a better place and leave that to the next generation and be kind along the way? That was something that touched me, and that was something that I decided I wanted to, that's a voice that I wanted to do my part to share with the world what little part I could. And so that's when I got connected to Ruzan, and that's where our odyssey began. Over the next couple years following that, I think Ruzan will tell you, and probably has already told you, it was a circuitous path, a difficult path, to getting this book into the final format it is before you today. Ruzan did the lion's share of that work. I was lucky to be along in parts and stretches for that journey as a helper, assisting where I could. But the final work is something that I think all of us can be proud of, and not only all of us can be proud of. Ruzan, I've explained it. I've said this to you a couple different times throughout our journey, and it's my personal belief that there is nothing that immortalizes a person like their writings. And what you've done in this book that you've created, this wonderful book, you've ensured John's spirit was always going to be eternal. Now you've ensured that he will continue to have a place in the physical realm long after all of us are dead. Hundreds of years from now, people will be able to read John's writings, and through that they will get to know him. And I like to think that through those writings, not only will those people get to know him, they will be able to inhabit a better world. So I just hope that you've internalized that small message of mine, and I just can't tell you how proud I am of you, and I just know somewhere John is smiling down on you for all you've done for him. I'll leave you all with this. John and I were of the same generation. Again, we never crossed paths physically, but our generation has this overwhelming sense that we are facing a world that, if it's not bleak, it's getting bleaker in a few different ways. We're all reacting to this in different ways based on our personal backgrounds, our positions in society, our politics. But John was a soul who, when he was the rare soul that I've encountered, whether living or past, who is looking at the problems of the world blamelessly and compassionately, and who's thinking about finding something that can save us all. And that's an attitude that I try to have myself. And if that action of finding something promising, of finding something that brings us together, of finding common sense solutions that help raise humanity up, if that's not finding gold in the dark, then I don't know what is. So thank you all so much. You're all my friends, and I'm, again, terribly proud of you, Ruzan, and I look forward to meeting you all sometime down the road. Thanks so much.
We would now like to proceed to readings of John's writings.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor. I believe in the bright, flaming bronze torch of Lady Liberty. I might be saying, couldn't have been more original, in a sarcastic overtone. Liberty, way overrated. But the torch of the Statue of Liberty, located in my hometown of New York, means much more to me than just liberty or freedom. Sure, that's part of it, but to me it represents much more than this simple, much-used, overplayed concept. It means survival. It represents change and passage of time. First, let's get the obvious out of the way, the whole liberty thing. We've got to remember that we're the one and only true functioning democracy on the face of the earth, and have been since the day of our conception. Only in the United States can you say what you want to say with no fear of retribution by governing forces. Only in the United States can representatives of the people stand in the highest legislative chamber of the land, the Senate, and speak until their throats get dry. Only in the United States can we be so critical of billionaires or establishment political machines or major institutions with the guarantee that what we have to say will be respected, if not agreed with. We need not look far for examples where citizens are much less fortunate. Myanmar, Sudan, and even now advanced nations such as Russia and Turkey are suppressing citizens for speaking their mind against government policies. That torch of Lady Liberty reminds me to say my extra prayers each night, to be living in a place where I don't have to worry about being gunned down, stoned, or censored for exercising my God-given rights. So liberty is definitely a part of what makes the torch on Lady Liberty such an important symbol for me. It represents liberty and freedom, concepts which are cherished more in no other nation on earth. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. For me, the Statue of Liberty's flaming bronze torch represents survival. I am a born and raised New Yorker. Having moved to Kentucky only a year and a half ago, I know what you're thinking, what a change. I was 8 years old, and only 7 miles away, when the two iconic buildings of the metropolis that is New York City came crashing to the ground. I remember waking up on that beautiful morning in Manhattan and crossing the street to PSIS 187. My elementary school, which, like so many others in New York City, was nameless because there were simply too many schools to name them all. I lived in Washington Heights, Manhattan's northernmost neighborhood. We were only a couple of miles up from lower Manhattan. Not enough, though, to avoid smelling the debris rising in plumes of smoke from the wreckage that evening. The lucid memory of that day's events has stayed wedged in my mind, as bright and clear as the day it happened. It was 9 years ago that my third grade teacher got a call saying a student was going home. 5 minutes later, she got another one, then another. And then she called my name out. Why would I be going home? I thought. Lady Liberty looked on and undoubtedly shed tears, along with the rest of America. Tears for the nearly 3,000 mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, wives, husbands, relatives, and friends who died that day. But her torch was not quelled. The terrorists avoided striking the Statue of Liberty. It survived. The terrorists also did not strike the morale of the Americans, not their wildest dreams. And so the torch burns on, as fiery as it ever has been, and it is burning so vibrantly for one reason alone, because it has survived. Lastly, the torch on top of Lady Liberty, to me, indicates change through passage of time. I have evolved as a person, many and many. A time over since growing up in New York, along with the physical aspects of my environment that have changed, so the torch on the Statue of Liberty serves as the proverbial eternal flame, symbolizing where I came from and where I'm going. It's the flame that burns inside me, to keep me going, to keep me hoping, to keep me believing. Once upon a time, visitors could climb up the arm to the torch of the statue. Now the furthest source can goes to the top of the pedestal. But so what? It's there. You bet it's still there.
Thank you, Deacon. We now invite Mike Bogosia to read the excerpt National Honor Society Club speech.
Good evening, everyone. You know, life is very interesting. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but oftentimes I think back to things I've said to people before. Maybe a year or two ago, I said to myself, gosh, John, what you said then was absolute crap, just total nonsense. Which is good, I guess, because it just means we're growing as individuals. Becoming stronger, realizing things we've said and thought about before aren't really how things actually are. So I guess it's good. But I say that because in anything I say tonight comes across as stupidity to you, it probably is. It's just that I don't know it yet. I'm supposed to talk to you about leadership tonight. Not quite sure why Hayes picked me. I'm the president of a couple clubs, governor of KYA, but really those titles aren't what leadership is about. So I thought of how I was going to say something half decent tonight. Something at least a little meaningful that might stick. Who am I to talk? Who are we all to talk? We're only a year older than you. We certainly don't have infinite wisdom that comes with walking into your first senior class. But I guess from the first experience of leadership we've had, we can offer you some advice. So this is what I can say about leadership. For me, leadership begins with empathy. It begins with understanding the people you come in contact with, their views, where they come from, how their life impacts you. We are able to empathize with someone, understand them, you're much better equipped to lead them. It continues with vision and dedication. And it does not matter what the cause may be. If you're passionate about it, if you feel the impact of your work towards the betterment of others is significant, don't let anyone tell you it's not a worthwhile cause. Maybe you're passionate about the environment and keeping your school clean. Maybe you're passionate about working on AIDS prevention awareness. Maybe you're politically passionate. Maybe you feel called to be a pro-life advocate or a pro-choice advocate. Whatever you choose to do, that is a service. And whatever you choose to do, I only ask that you empathize with those you work for. And those you work against. Really try to understand them. Feel how they feel. True leaders excite others by tapping into the good of all of us. Leaders mess up, just like everyone else. But they acknowledge their mistakes and emerge stronger than ever. Because honestly, how many of you will be here if you didn't get the benefit of putting National Honor Society on your college application? If it was just a community service with nothing in return, probably very few. I don't know if I would be here last year, but let me tell you something. All that this club is going to be for you is signing this book, attending the meetings, and logging hours spent hating what you do. Fulfill the community service requirement, do yourself a favor, and quit now. Trust me, you'll have plenty more to put in your college application. Stay in the club only because you care. Make yourself believe in the community service you do. Find something you're passionate about. Believe in something. And if you don't believe in something, as the corny old phrase goes, you're bound to fall for it. And if you've already forgotten everything I've said, at least remember for a little. Well, this last wish I have for you as leaders. I personally hope and pray each and every one of you, every one of us, goes out into the world and does really, really well. In the school, in our jobs, whatever. But what's more important is that we all go out into the world and do good. I also want to say, I was president of National Honor Society in my school for 2 years, and I gave a very similar speech. And after reading this book about a month ago, it was very, touching to read this and, see similar things. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Ike. We now invite Vahe to read the excerpt, Henry Clay High School Academy Graduation Day Address.
Hello, my name is Vahe. I'm brother of the Vahe Peter. I'm relative from Roseanne's sister's brother-in-law. So I'm going to be reading part of the book, Henry Clay High School Academy Graduation Day Address. So folks, we made it. After 4 years of work, 4 years of study, 4 years of playing our hearts out on a field, of writing our hearts out on a paper, we made it. After 4 years of love and anger, friendship and animosity, of laughing harder than we ever have, and of crying pretty hard too, we made it. It took a lot to get here. Lots of sleepless nights, sweaty days, and the whole experience was punctuated by all kinds of moments, happy ones as well as sad ones, and moments of great achievement, but also great embarrassment. I remember walking into the connector building on a rainy day once, book in hand, took a step forward into a puddle and bam! I was on the floor, books everywhere. It was just about school was starting, and this was a big group of people behind. We were laughing hysterically. Most of them were girls. But just as memorable was my first ever speech, team trophy, or when I was elected governor at the Kentucky Youth Assembly. For you, it's probably something else. Maybe it's the first ever touchdown you made, or your first tennis win, your first basketball shot, your first performance, your first real friendship, or your first kiss that you'll remember for quite a while. Or maybe it's something totally different. Whatever you take away from high school today, as we all graduate together, know that today you made it. Today, as we all graduate together, know that today you made it. Carry the energy of the passion you'll build up and go conquer the world. Class of 2011. Whether you're going to college, whether you're entering the workforce, let the force always be with you. And don't let anything or anyone hold you back. Thank you, Henry Clay. Thank you to the educators and mentors who have made this day possible. Thank you to our parents who have been with us from the day one and stand with us today as we enter adulthood. Henry Clay, it has been an honor to serve you as a student body president. This might be the last time we are all together, but let us this day a starting point, and let us never give up fighting for our dreams. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So let us always stand up for what we believe in, stand up for our friends and families, and stand up today and every day to make not only ourselves better, but to make this world a more compassionate, welcoming, better place. And now, with diplomas in hand, let's go show the world what it means to be a Blue Devil. Thank you.
Thank you, Audit. We now invite Khachatryan to read application assignments. And also, please mention your relation to John before you start reading the excerpt, so we can see.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm John's cousin, and I'm very grateful to be here today because I wasn't very involved in his life, and neither was I. But without John, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have many pieces of advice, and he was a very memorable person in the sense that of the things that I got to go do because of him playing a part and always caring for me. So, with that being said, I'll be reading his application assignment he wrote in spring of 2016. I have received 2 tickets for violations over my life. The first was a moving violation ticket issued in May of 2011. My senior year of high school outside of Salt Lake City. A friend and I on a sightseeing trip across Utah. As I drove, we passed 2 police cars on the right edge of the highway. I continued to drive in the right lane at normal speed while passing the cars. One of the 2 police vehicles quickly stopped us to issue a ticket for violating Utah's move over law, which stimulates motorists must move into a farther lane upon passing a parked police car in order to protect officers from being hit by vehicles. I paid the ticket as soon as I returned home. As of 2015, many states, including Utah, were continuing campaigns to inform drivers about the law, as many continued violating it unwittingly. I certainly will not be in that position again. The second was a subway violation issued in New York City in December of 2012. 3 years ago, in the winter of my sophomore year at Yale following a 4-day succession of finals, I found myself leaping into the subway en route to Grand Central Terminal. Large suitcase in tow, I raced to make the A train audibly pulling into the station. As per Murphy's Law, the back cannot squeeze past the turnstile. When someone walking out opened the service gate, I ran through, grateful for the lifeline, only to be stopped by a police officer emerging from an unmarked door. I hadn't swiped the MetroCard. I walked away dejected. 10 minutes later, the train was gone and I'd been slapped with a $100 ticket for jumping the turnstile, though no jumping had been involved. I sent in the money as with the parking ticket and forgot about it until my eye caught a daily news headline in 2014. Fare evasion arrests surge in recent years. Many who are stopped for the reason I was can't just board the next train. The New York Police Department is authorized to treat turnstile jumping as a misdemeanor, a crime, instead of a parking type violation. A police officer can arrest the offender at will, though the New York District Attorney's Office found that arrests had increased 69% from 2008 to 13, and that being African American, Latino, or simply failing to present identification all significantly increased the probability of arrest and jail time. For every white arrest, there are 5 Latino arrests and 8 African American arrests. I appeared to be white, I had a driver's license, and I had no criminal history. With this privilege, a careless act comes and goes. Without it, school enrollment, employment prospects, and an entire future may instantly disappear. It is an avalanche of trouble with little to no means to escape. The immense difference, which manifests itself all the more powerfully in criminal arrests and prosecutions, rises far above a question of inequality. It is, as Ta-Nehis Coates describes, one of the many cosmic injustices that animate daily life in America and that disproportionately target minorities and the poor.
Thank you, Vahe. These writings of John were from the chapter titled Early Writings, so they were among his earliest essays. We now go on to National Discourse. For this, I invite Susanna Garustova to read Moderation Rebuilt.
Hello, my name is Susanna, and I am John's cousin's childhood friend. And I was lucky enough to be invited to stay at Aris and Buzan's house whenever I was visiting New York. Later in 2016, also visited the family in New York. I went there with my family and my now grown kids, and my kids were also lucky enough to meet John. The chapter is called Motivation Visited, Devil's Advocate, written on May 27, 2012. Stereotypes and rigid political dogmas define American political life. You are either a Democrat or a Republican, a liberal or a conservative. When you think of a typical Democrat, you are likely to come up with the image of an urbane, well-dressed subway rider, toting a bag made from recycled bottles and caring for the poor in whenever spare time is available amidst the many social commitments and active lifestyle. A graduate of Harvard or Columbia, he or she eats a regular 3 times a day and chugs several cups of fair trade certified coffee an hour. This is if you are a Democrat. Otherwise, your mind will likely conjure up an image of a morally depraved, foolishly idealistic, self-absorbed fashionista, eager to tax you more so your money might feed the undeserving masses and to give your daughter free birth control. He or she lives in a 1-bedroom apartment infested with rats and adorned with poor quality photos of Che Guevara and Jimi Hendrix, smoking something otherworldly. How are Republicans viewed? As keepers of guard, of course. The Republican is the true American, perhaps a farmer or a businessman, who has employed thousands of people and run a successful business. He still wears his old ripped Levi's jeans, even though he can probably afford much more, because he's humble and remembers his roots. He prays daily and attends church weekly, and he always blasts country music in his pickup, donning Confederate flag bumper sticker. Or your typical Republican might be an old, grumpy white male whose idea of fun on the weekends is shooting defenseless deer while wearing khaki camouflage. He, definitely a male, thinks everyone who is an illegal immigrant is Mexican, wants taxes so low that people on welfare starve to death, and has never been to New York. Worse, he has no desire of ever going. Not one of these 4 descriptions exactly define anyone, nor do they come close to describing the political parties. The Democratic Party was prevalent in the rural South before it gained a foothold in the pro-labor union North. And the Republican Party was almost exclusively a Northern party with roots in 19th century abolitionism. There are African Americans Republicans in New York and white Democrats in Alabama. But nuance and moderation is no longer a part of the political culture in America. Republicans have to appeal more and more to the Southern, gun-toting base, and Democrats to their labor unions and feminist groups of the North and West for political victory. And they still are securing victories, no doubt, but it does not seem to be the same in the country as a whole. Over the past 2 decades, America's dominant political parties have swung more and more to their sides of the room, daring to come close to the middle less and less. The Democrats have lost many of their subgroups over the years. Pro-lifers, of which the most famous Democratic dynasty of American history, the Kennedys, was part of, are almost all gone. They've lost most of the Blue Dog members of their coalition in Congress, consisting of members who were particularly economically more conservative than their typically northeastern counterparts. What is left is primarily a group of quasi-socialist, radically pro-choice members who are unwilling to talk tax cuts, or reasonable restrictions on abortion. On the flip side, the Republicans have lost quite a bit of their constituency as well, particularly in Northeast, where only 2 of New England's 22 congressmen are Republicans. But what's wrong with mixing things up a bit? Parties function today as sources of negative groupthink and conventions where everyone confirms each other's beliefs instead of challenging them. What if I'm a pro-union, pro-environment, pro-gun control Republican who wants my taxes reasonably low and my borders secure? Or what if I'm a Democrat who believes in a government that takes care of all Americans, but also find myself in the pro-life camp? Do I have no room in that party? The short answer is no. Such candidates cannot win primaries because even if they won't admit it, both parties have litmus tests for their candidates. Entrenched major party donors and bosses won't allow it, because any shift from the conventional platform would alienate a key voting bloc. And so, the American people, time after time, are forced to choose between 2 rigid dogmas that very few voters actually fully agree with. In business, the only antidote to monopoly is competition. The same goes for politics. But how on earth can the moderate, questioning middle compete against interests so entrenched, so rooted in money and power? The generation that answers this question will have a modern American political realignment to call their own.
Thank you, Susanna. We now invite Nune Yeganyan to read Yale Federalist Party speech.
I'm really honored to be part of this wonderful event celebrating John's legacy and honoring his memory. My name is Nune Yeganyan, and I'm an old friend of John's mother. We've been close friends since elementary school, and John's father, Iris, was also my dear friend. I met John a few times during my short visits to New York, and also their visits to Los Angeles. And I always knew that John was a very inquisitive and intelligent young man who was interested in politics, in history, traveling. He traveled around the world and so many other things. But when I read the book, I discovered how little I knew about him. As I was reading his essays, even before the book was published, I realized that he cared so deeply about humanity, about the disparities in our society and in the world, about religion, and about our dear homeland, Armenia. I sincerely hope that that John's thoughts and ideas expressed in this book will guide and inspire, and there will be an inspiration. His compassion and his service to humanity, all of that, his boundless love will be an inspiration to the present and future generations. I'm going to read some excerpts from chapter 1 on national discourse. That will be section 2. This is from section 2, his college years. It was published in Yale, in the news, in Yale News in 2011. And it's called Yale Federalist Party Speech. So these are some passages from the speech. History's tendency to repeat itself is particularly poignant today with regards to America's military, which, like the standing armies of antiquity, has increasingly proven that it cannot stand still for too long, America's continually escalating radical interventionist foreign policy has spread our armed forces thin from a tactical standpoint. But as well as we well know, it threatens a more significant disunity as well, divorcing the armed forces from society and removing the rank and file from the public's view. As the army becomes more exclusive, with less family members or friends known to the general public who serve, bonds are broken or never made. More people just don't care, emotionally detached from unknown people, fighting in unknown places for an ambiguous cause at best. The Defense Department report discovered that 25% of military applicants can't pass the exam, and 75% of recruit-age Americans are obese or have drug problems. What is to be done? And more importantly, what is the root cause of this demise in one's military-loving, reverent culture? Some would attribute it to a degeneration in America's moral fabric. That is happening, to be sure, but I'm not sure it's to blame for this particular phenomenon. The true reason lies in our army being spread vastly too thin, putting an exorbitant strain on servicemen who must endure perpetually extended tours of duty. It has also led to the armed forces relaxing its standards as to who can join. The army is appealing to people it wouldn't have before, as a direct result of frivolous wars begun without any sense of public consensus and conducted poorly afterwards. To make the military more respected at home and abroad, as failed candidate John Kerry once said in a temporary moment of likely Botox-induced lucid insight, we might prove to the American people that our military decision-making is rooted in the constitutional duty to defend American citizens and nothing more. Leave the evangelizing, the spreading of the freedom agenda gospel to the churches. Our men and women in uniform don't deserve, at their livelihood's expense, to be the pawns of our leaders' pretentious ideological imperialism. So this is all very true now, even though it was written more than 12 years. Even more, actually. That's
That concludes the readings from National Discourse. We now proceed to the American education system. And for this, we invite Aroutiounian to read the excerpt, The Knowledge Oligarchy. Leah is the daughter of Martha Aroutiounian, who is a member of the Foundation, a board member.
My name is Yale Federalist, and as I said, my father is a member of the Bruce Foundation board that grants Aroutiounian scholarships. And I'll be reading Knowledge Oligarchy from Yale Daily News from November 2014. As the cold sets in and the applications at the admissions office arrive daily by the hundreds, my thoughts recently wandered to the months before that hectic time started for me at the beginning of senior year, when I first learned just how much effort other students had already put into their applications. The prospect of applying to Yale only entered my head in the summer before senior year, and when I told my counselor at school, she almost snickered. People start their applications to Yale in the 8th grade. It was a fact that had never occurred to me. In the 8th grade, I was dealing with a family move to Kentucky from New York City, and college was the last thing on my mind. It would take more than 2 years to start thinking concretely about the vague jumble of schools beginning to float around in the ether as possible choices. Finding out that friends had been making moves directed at college admissions for years was a startling, alarming realization. It wasn't until I got here that I discovered many people had spent years being groomed for this at many Yales around the country. Boarding schools, day schools, and uber-competitive public high schools with strong histories of sending people to the Ivies. Freshmen arrived on campus, as soon as I figure out myself, already conversing the Yale language. In other words, they'd taken humanitarian trips around the world, and could knowledgeably complain about which airports were comfortable, and which ones to avoid. Somebody I had met had been to 77 countries. All this projected confidence, legitimacy, and learningness. Welcome to Yale. But I was fortunate in 2 major ways. I went to a very decent suburban high school, and I spent years in speech and debate. Confidence, or at least a visible kind, wasn't a problem. I could match the loudest person if I wanted to, even though everyone knows the most socially adept way to handle section is to time your comments carefully and seem less than confident, even if you have a lot to say on a particular day, as though to avoid playing into the stereotype. Winning at Yale means being so good that you know when to seem smart and when that's actually going to do you more harm than good. But if you're wondering where this is going, here it is. Almost no one in the world thinks this much about projecting the right self-image, and those who do are here in the highest concentration. The students groomed by family and society from a young age not just how to work well, but also to represent oneself in an insecure, neurotic way that discourages over displays of wealth or knowledge. You've got to know when certain statements fly and when they don't. And these nuances and subtleties of how to behave go far beyond what common sense provides. You have to be intimately aware of how people think and perceive others in the cultural current context. We live in a knowledge oligarchy, where not only we're very few are aware of the accepted modes of behavior, making it very hard to act in the requisite ways for success among the elite, but this knowledge is also very hard to transmit. You already need to have some to get into Yale in the first place, and it only becomes more of an important factor from there on. What about those who don't, and never figure out what exactly you have to know and be aware of to have a shot at reaching the upper boundaries of the American dream? Or is elite culture really as segmented and out of reach as self-perpetuating as ever? This adds a very different dimension to the discussion about economic and social inequality in America. It's true that every once in a while an extremely adept individual will come from poverty, aided by natural talents, and to get to the top of the food chain. But for every one of those individuals, it seems as though there must be 10 who had a lot of help along the way, who were told do this and don't do that, and who came to Yale with their vocabulary and awareness already trained for the social situation they were about to walk into. It's true for Yale, her fellow Ivies, and for many other hubs of the elite culture in America today. Knowledge oligarchy disproportionately favors the upper class, and is a subtler kind of dominance, because it exists between the lines of speech and behavior. But it's just another way that those endemic poverties are systematically shortchanged by a status quo, whose bizarre ways they cannot even begin to comprehend. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. We now invite Rosalie Bagdasaryan to read How Not to Say Hello.
Hello everyone, my name is Rosalind. I am John's cross cousin. I did not know John personally, however I did get to know him through the snippets of information that I received when I visited my Aunt Autumn's house. I got to know about his achievements, his personality, and his humanitarian efforts. Even though I didn't know him personally, I had an extremely heavy heart when I heard of his passing. I'm very proud to have had such an influential and charismatic young Armenian in our community. It brings me joy to see that his legacy will live on and inspire many more people to come through the Hui's Foundation, his book, and the people whose lives he has touched. How not to say hello. It happens with enough frequency to make you wonder. You're on the street, in a dining hall, or going to class, and you say hi to someone, only to get a deer in headlights look, or even more bizarre, a reciprocal hey that's uttered without any eye contact. It's like greeting a zombie. Sometimes it's accidental, but often it's tactically assumed to be a normal way of greeting an acquaintance. Well, it's not. It's rude and highly abnormal. For those wondering, I'm not a freshman from the Midwest, in the throes of withdrawal because everyone on the East Coast is impersonal. I grew up in New York City, where a smile or an unwarranted greeting can get you assaulted, but that's the city. Yale is ostensibly a community, and there's no reason we should be morphing into neurotic characters from Woody Allen's films so early in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalie. We now invite Andrea Mamikyan to read Full Plates, Empty Hearts.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Andrei Manukyan. Me and Victor, who presented beforehand, are John Aroutiounian's nephews, and I will be reading his article from Yale Daily News, Full Plates and Empty Hearts, from February 19, 2014. It was the last meeting of my philosophy class's discussion section, and the teacher's assistant was waxing nostalgic. As she said her goodbyes, she dispensed the customary closing platitude. I hope that if this class has taught you anything, it is to question everything. 5 years ago, when I stuck a question everything pin on my backpack and drove to high school, it would have sounded like good advice. But this time around, I couldn't wait to walk out the door. Most in college today are old enough to be able to look at photos of their young selves existing in a previous age of fashion and respond with some combination of chuckling and cringing. It is also possible to do that with thoughts, previously held opinions, or worries that seem careless or trivial today. It is usually a good thing, a sign of growing up. This was the case for a while with question everything. Teenagers are prone to love this motto. They use it with their parents, with their teachers, sometimes to their face, and they use it internally when considering the ideas they read or hear about. Every easy target, everything that sounds stupid, by whatever criteria used, gets an eye roll in the list of obnoxious, incredulous questions. Sometimes it is merited, but usually it is not. I was, for the most part, no different. Most of what people said that I didn't immediately agree with was clearly because of fatal flaws in their reasoning. This was no time for that which wasn't useful or didn't feel right. But something goes unrealized when you go around questioning everything. You are rarely turning the critical eye inward. What ends up happening is that you do whatever you want, living in the present moment, and regarding everything else with doubt. The present is the most selfish of times, more so than the past, which is gone and therefore useless, and more so than the future, which invites all sorts of considerations and can't be used now. But the present is here. We consume it like a car consumes gas, only we're continually running for about 80 years or so. We are burning through every minute, every step, everything we eat, read, and every person we talk to. And to question everything is the ultimate way to live in the present, and the present alone, because soul is noble skepticism. It is a license to live free of being tied to something that directs us away from mere consumption. It has become so hard to identify with any situation not your own. Maybe it was always like this. But it seems so much of our existence nowadays is spent doing things that allow us to see reflections of ourselves. The clubs we join, the people we associate with, and the technology we use. But we all volunteer, you say, every summer. And we all have friends with different beliefs than us. Yet I wonder if this is usually a case of feeling or just observing and using for our own sake. Most will never feel living on $1 a day, even if they know what it means. Religion is another case. I remember hearing an exchange between two friends where one said he was religious and explained what that meant for his beliefs about the world and his place in it. The other said with astonishment, "You actually believe that? People in the West, in the 50 years since what you believed could determine life or death, have become experts at living life with a constant mirror held up at themselves while everything else is problematic. Now, whether or not we smash it might be the difference between significant human connection and lonely, self-absorbed obscurity."
Thank you, Andre. We now invite, again, Ike Bogosian to read Salmon, Not Pink.
This is an excerpt out of Yale Daily News from 2014, April 7th. 2 winters ago, I stood on the beach in a remote part of western Costa Rica after having somehow managed to convince my poor parents all they wanted was one relaxing week to shake off the exhaustion from their 8-day hospital work schedules, to forsake a less adventurous vacation and rent a little bungalow on the edge of a tiny coastal village. If you were a local resident, or even a tourist for that matter, the sight of this guy standing on the beach would have seemed bizarrely out of place. Clad in seersucker swords and a polo from Vineyard Plain Sail, I looked at the shimmering bay and the obvious question, who are you? The answer in that moment of handicapping self-consciousness, only possible in a setting vastly different from what you're used to, wasn't obvious then and isn't now. I wasn't the extremely awkward, slightly foreign-vested elementary school kid who would sprint home after school. Nor was I the middle schooler in Kentucky who came home from New York and started to pick up, slowly, all of the social cues. But now that I was a sophomore at Yale, I also knew that wearing salmon, not pink polo, and seersucker shorts didn't make me an Eastern Coast yuppie on the inside anymore, then it made me that girl I'd pass on old campus every day, wearing some variant of blue scales and red feathers. Go ahead, psychoanalyze. It's not a hard case. After growing up in an Armenian immigrant household, where every day felt like a time for everyone involved, you say, you probably wanted validation, and turned into the clothing of wasplet. Or perhaps you wanted to stand out when you were home, wearing I go to Yale, because it was too obnoxious to say it out loud. Or you just liked pink. All of these explanations are probably somewhat true. Yale is full of middle and upper middle class kids who resemble young, fit, hungry dogs. They've tasted meat for the first time and their eyes have crazed intensity about them. Go to the next JP Morgan information session or stop by the news. If you really don't know what I'm talking about, or for that matter, read Yale College Council election histories since time immemorial. But as these questions of success and identity clash, weird things start to happen, and the effects certainly aren't limited to any class. People start to become their hyper selves as soon as it feels like campus is drowning under the influence of its own individuality. People become all kinds of archetypes. The bubbly, often wealthy guy with the gray hair in all the photos, the Yale political union hack, the YCC bureaucrat, and the radical activist. You could go on. As colleges like Yale become even more diverse and international, these archetypes take on all sorts of new variations, but the fundamentals stay the same. None of these categories are bad in and of themselves, but they all present the possibility of their own pink polo moments. When these moments happen, if a personal experience is any guide, another hard question can sometimes present itself. Which is the bigger joke? That any myself has been narrowed into this specific identity that only represents a small part of who I actually am, or that I'll have to pretend to be the same person I was before I left. Some people don't end up asking themselves these questions. Some feel like their developed identities represent them very well, and that's fine. I remember my personal surprise at seeing how comfortable a group of students I was on felt in their suede shorts, pants, and jewelry. It wasn't showy masquerade. As understated, it was just understated. Everyone has heard of the cliche that you could be yourself because everyone else is taken, but what do you do when you're already taken? Everywhere you look, personal lives are individualized and planned. Parenthood, relationships, even relaxation. This makes the urge to distinguish yourself even more strong and suggests something is deeply wrong with American university life. It also leads to inadvertent close-mindedness and phases out deeper connections to intangibles.
Thank you, Vahe. This concludes the readings from American Education System. We now proceed to faith, love, empathy, and virtue. And with this, I'd like to invite Victoria or Victor? Victoria. I would like to invite Victoria Manukian to read The Price of Emotional Poverty.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Victoria Manukian. I'm John's cousin. He's my uncle's son, our dear John. I will be reading an article from Yale Daily News published on October 7, 2013, The Price of Emotional Poverty. If you only have 5 minutes today and are reading this column, put it down and look up Robert F. Kennedy's speech at the University of Kansas on March 18, 1968 instead. Not only is it one of the most beautiful and soaring works of oratory presented on the national stage in recent memory, but it's also full of oft-neglected insights about the state of American social life, written during a time of unprecedented turmoil. Kennedy, in a far cry from our political discourse, as Luke like recently talks about the health of our national soul and the emotional challenges we encounter in confronting growing poverty and inequality. Why, he asks, does the gross national product data look great on paper while there is social instability everywhere? Even if we act to erase material poverty, he notes, there is another greater task. It is to confront the poverty of satisfaction, purpose, and dignity that afflicts us all. If this sounds like a bizarre thing to say, consider how far removed our political conversations are from this kind of thinking today. In a discourse largely dominated by a tug-of-war between factions arguing for a little more redistribution or a little less, too little thought is given to the resources beyond money that people need to flourish.
Poverty takes many forms. Its material form is the most obvious and calls for our most immediate attention. But its more deeply rooted form, that of emotional poverty, or the poverty of satisfaction, is a subtler and much harder to get rid of. It can affect the rich and the poor just as harshly, and I have personally seen it both inside and outside Yale's walls. And to understand poverty in America, we must come to grips with both forms. When the wealthy suffer from emotional poverty, they usually have the resources and the community to either pull themselves out of the situation or to find help. To suffer from the both intense emotional and material poverty leaves an individual with next to nothing. Endemic poverty perpetuates itself when people grow up without unconditional love. Communities that care, schools that are safe to learn in, bedtime stories, and much more. In the next passage, John writes about his childhood, which resonates with me, because this is when I met him. When I first moved to the United States, he was a 6, 7-year-old boy. It's hard to talk about John without getting emotional. A sweet, vibrant boy who could talk at length about philosophy, society, financial system at that young age. I remember their living room set up into a makeshift bank system where he could show where the money goes in, how financial transactions take place. And that's when me and my friend Susanna, we just moved to the US and we were just blown away by our little John. So if you were to ask Roseanne, how did they raise a child like that bright? She would say that he was born that way. And I agree, in a lot of ways. Yes, he was born with a lot of great traits from his parents. And yes, well, he has your traits, Roseanne. And others is bright, smart, witty, hardworking, loving, generous. That's all describes John and your family. You guys guided John. He led you, but you guided with your wisdom. And you've been that guide to many people, including myself and our family, and many who came in your way, those who know you. I would like to thank Quiz Foundation, Roseanne, most of all, for publishing this book, for organizing this event, for keeping John's light, his fire, his memory, his legacy for us. This is a book to cherish, so forever thankful for that. As John continues to write, I was lucky. I grew up in a home with 2 parents who loved unconditionally. We didn't have much money. My parents had immigrated from Armenia to New York the year before I was born. And while they were doctors there, it would take more than a decade before they could earn anything remotely close to an American doctor's salary. So for about the first 10 years of my life, we lived in the small apartments in Manhattan. And my parents worked in pawn shops, at labs running dishwashers, and as babysitters. They kept me clothed and fed while studying for exams and climbing their way up. Classic immigrant story. But they also stayed up with me until I finished my homework and took me to the park on weekends. We were a family, and it felt that way every day. Home was a very safe place where I could feel loved and wanted. There is no discussion of emotional poverty in today's political paradigm. It's just not built into the discourse. When was the last time you heard either political party talk about the poverty of love in their narratives? People are increasingly dissociating from community institutions like churches that have traditionally taken responsibility for emotional well-being. Because people don't have those social resources to turn to, the political rhetoric needs to start grasping these issues. Both in rich and poor communities, Americans need more than material wealth. In communities with few material resources, the problems go beyond economic stagnation. Issues like physical violence and poor health have roots in emotional problems like vulnerability and loneliness. In wealthy communities like Yale, we may not struggle with lack of material resources, but we do have some of the same emotional hunger. Our insecurity is manifesting itself in our sex culture, in our disturbing lack of inner peace, and in our inability to get beyond superficiality in many of our friendships. With the issue of emotional poverty so widespread, government, an increasingly large source, for better or worse, of social authority, must begin to speak to this problem.
Thank you so much for that. We now invite again Vahe to read When the Power Goes Off.
I went home to New York City over Easter weekend to see my parents and to do what we do as a family only once a year, go to church. If you're at Holy Cross Church of Armenia any other weekend, there are maybe 10 parishioners in the pews. But this weekend, the holiest of the Christian calendar, there is hardly an empty seat in the building. Everyone looks at each other nervously for cues on when to stand and sit, since most haven't been since the same time last year. Yet every year they come back. The meta-narrative of the prodigal sons spans millennia, taking on 20th century forms in the lives and works of Edith Stein, Evelyn Waugh, C.S. Lewis, and Oscar Wilde. Lewis recalled his conversion to Christianity as an experience in which he was, quotation marks, kicking, struggling, resentful, and darting his eyes in every direction for a chance to escape. In the end, he felt compelled to submit to what, whether he liked it or not, he deemed to be the truth. Religion is lost on a great many Yale students, for whom religious practice is a childhood activity one compartmentalizes in college, if not abandoning it completely. Few have the deep, serious discussions about how to live, partly because the implications of these discussions are way too real. We intensely hunger for truth, but don't know, don't have the time, or don't have the bravery to start looking. Religion is powerful because of God. Social justice is a noble cause, and lifelong self-improvement should be in the back of everyone's mind. But being part of a community center can do that for you. For those who think that this is all religion offers, you're only getting the frosting on the cake. Tastes good, looks good, feels good, but it ain't the cake. It is the externality of divinity from the meekness and banality of life that makes it powerful. It is the externality that reminds us, when we grow blind by routine, that good and evil are everywhere around and inside of us. When the power goes out, as it's bound to do at some point in every individual's life, the distractions with which we foolishly placate ourselves and justify the significance of our existence fade away. Serenity is hard to come by, but religion isn't just another bomb. Some days you feel good, some days you don't. But religion teaches you to take everyone as they come and to live authentically, because God is going nowhere. So Yale, please start talking again. Talk long hours into the night. And sure, you'll still do your homework, you'll still run 10 clubs, you'll still go to Toads, but do a little bit of forward thinking too, so that you're a little less scared when the lights go out. Ask yourself, when you go to church once a year, why you bother showing up at all? Are you selling yourself short? And finally, while you still can, look, as Hopkins says, just a little closer into the features of men's faces, in quotation marks. Is there anything there? That's the end.
Thank you, Deacon. We now invite Oksana Uzunyan to read the eponymous Finding Gold in the Dark.
Hi everyone, my name is Oksana and I'm John's
cousin's wife. Excuse the nervous undertones in my voice. Finding gold in the dark. How good writers must have had it 300 years ago. How wonderful it must have felt to pen books and essays regarding emotion with abandon. Unafraid, or at least less so, of the demi critique of unoriginality. Having your doubts labeled cliché is in many ways more stinging than the charge of plagiarism. In the latter instance, you are accused of foolishly stealing something good and proudly calling it your own. In the former, you are accused of proudly calling something your own and foolishly thinking it was good. But everything has become cliché, as someone somewhere has surely already noted. Even the realization that most of your mental output is flim-flam that people in touch with reality came across on the internet ages ago is itself cliché. As a consequence, countless young men and women consider themselves, and the number of in-touch literati has seemingly concluded that they have nothing new, nothing personally meaningful beyond what's already been said to say about love, let alone a smorgasbord of other anchors of human sentimentality and behavior. Indeed, it is at least largely a consequence of the information onslaught of the last several decades that we came across more and more, yet no less and less, to talk of love in the context of loyalty, responsibility, and in any sense of permanence in college is so embarrassing nowadays. So childish, few think themselves apt to make any sort of contribution to such a discussion and scoff at others who try. Abandoning even temporarily the notion of finding personal meaningfulness within timeless aspects of the human condition is not only destructive and contrary to the dignity of the individual, but a direct affront to the spirit of Christian purpose. Confining our discussion to love, a languishing hope in finding something uniquely beautiful in our relationships with others leads to the confusing and often fruitless endeavor involving finding your own meaning. Because we aren't aimless blobs of jelly floating around in the universe, and we're created with dignity and express purpose, the search of meaning in those who reject the universality of purpose in each individual takes all sorts of twists and turns. Countless friends have told me about their experiences dabbling in all sorts of religions, taking up new causes and retrofitting personal relationships with illusionary meanings that weren't there before. Many things can attempt to fill, if not completely, the void left by a rejection of purpose. For some, a pet issue, environmentalism, sexual liberation, you name it, essentially become their church, complete with dogma, rigid adherence, and a salvation narrative. Over Christmas break, I spent a few weeks traveling Costa Rica. The country is absolutely beautiful, and its people are happy, though large swaths of the capital city, San Jose, are in shambles. On our last evening there, my family was recommended a restaurant in a hotel located in the heart of town called Grano de Oro, or the Grain of Gold. As the taxi rolled up to the entrance, the sight of the surroundings were miserable, blocks upon blocks, stink of urban decay and desolation. And then we walked into the hotel, and it was as if we had entered into the play de Yansam scene from Casablanca. Velvet walls, beautiful grandfather clocks, a medieval courtyard, graced with light and gentle music pressing the guests enjoying their meals. It was a relic from times past, a grain of gold indeed. How do we create our own grains of gold amid the prevailing darkness and narcissistic illusion at Yale? The concept of a relationship is scary and difficult, as it should be. Relationships involve commitment, effort, and continual self-confrontation and improvement. All the more reason to go out on a limb, to be ironically countercultural. Today, living on the edge is not random sex with the first person you manage to reel in from thoughts. It's courtship and self-giving. It's showing we need love, to borrow C.S. Lewis's term, but it's also showing give love. We love because we need to feel it back. But we must also love purely for the sake of giving. True love reflects the concept of agape, coined Greek for Christ's love of man, and man's reciprocal love of Christ through his deeds and love of others. In no greater form can this be expressed between individuals than through practicing self-sacrificing love
where the adventure of the evening is not the new sex move, but the latest act of charity, more shocking and lasting than the impression that the former can provide. It is freedom redefined, shifting the idea from freedom to freedom from, if we may borrow the social theorist Isaiah Berlin's framing. More properly understood, true freedom lies not in availing oneself for whatever he wants to indulge in appetite, but in liberation from the strains of the appetite through the discovery of a higher good. Everything is betting against you. The medicalization of sex, and consequently morality, provides intellectual background to the free sex movement, and the peer pressure provides the social background. Given this background, people convince themselves that the mutual taking found in a one-night stand is harmless. In this atmosphere, individuals are bound to make all sorts of mistakes, to be gripped by all kinds of lust, and to prescribe the name love to what is nothing more than a set of raging hormones. The Yale student, contrary to what may be his own beliefs, is no Augustine, and he fell into similar traps many times over. The key is to always call mistakes by their true name. The moment a mistake is no longer recognized as such, and sin is accounted for, the individual is on his way into more trouble. Our Leon Cost and the New York Times' Alex Williams write about the end of courtship. This Valentine's Day, and in the weeks, months, and years ahead, you have the power to be countercultural. To retro? No.
Thank you, Osama. Now I invite Eugenia Baltasarian to read The Bearded Man.
Hi everyone, my name is Eugenia Baltasarian. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to Rozan, to everyone who put together this amazing event, and to John's entire family for raising such an incredible, amazing human being who we can all be here to celebrate today. I did not know John very closely, but I know everyone here who's my age has heard their parents talk endlessly about John, about all of the things that he did to make the world a better place. And to inspire all of us to be like John, to care, to put in the effort, to make a difference in the world. And I think sitting here today and listening to all of the stories, there are several themes that I think permeate each and every single story. Character, passion, inspiration, community. John did more for his community, the issues he was passionate about, and those he loved than most will do in their entire lives. And I want that to be the theme, at least it is for me today, that when life presents you with difficult decisions, when you're feeling lazy, you feel like your life has no meaning for whatever reason, I'm going to ask myself what John would do in those situations. Get passionate, follow your ethical compass, do something about the issues you see in the world, and most importantly, help others. And I think most of us will lead more meaningful lives and make the right decisions. So with that, I'm going to read the passage called The Bearded Man and Me. It was published in the Yale Daily News on December 2nd, 2013. Coming home is always a mixed bag, frequently full of boisterous relatives, warm nights on the couch with parents, and time to reflect, while briefly outside of the college rat race mentality. But it's a mixed bag because it also means laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and thinking, how many more days like this will I have? What if Metro North derails tomorrow, or there's a gunman on campus, and the thin balloon of invincibility is popped? What if something happens to my parents? Who will I call to feel safe? Not just comforted, but safe. Gratitude for each day is an ideal, at least in my own case, very inconsistently practiced. But the gratitude that rushes in at home during nights like those isn't just plain gratitude. It comes with a generous burst of dread. Dread because precious moments are so short And once you realize you're in the middle of one, even shorter. I'd give a lot to take this awareness away and to live in the moment again the way kids do, when the big picture meant Arthur at 4 p.m. and not thinking about internships, plans for graduation, marriage, and the possibility of being alone. But being at Yale, you've got to put this wistful mood aside. There are papers to write, goals to make. You shelve your vulnerability far away and focus on running the race. When you need a break, but can't have one long enough, when each day feels shorter and shorter, daylight savings time or not, it's off to toads we go. Pause, rewind, repeat. Each time we get a little more impatient, a little harder on the inside. But on the 30th time, you encounter the bearded man who paces up and down Chapel Street, occasionally asking for money. And something happens. You're sitting in Starbucks with the professor, and the bearded man comes in. The professor says, "Hey man, want some coffee?" He stops to say he's doing just fine. A cup of coffee would be great, thank you. He asks who I am. "Oh, just one of my students." When he leaves, the professor explains that the bearded man is a regular at his church, and no matter how little the man has, he always puts something in the collection basket. I bring the conversation back to where it was, some obscure book theme that now seems pathetically trivial, hoping he doesn't notice as I pretend to look at the British Art Museum display and wipe the moisture from the corner of my eye. And then there's the day full of missteps, when you come back to your room and your ritualistic online news browsing is interrupted by wandering thoughts about that unpleasant look from someone in section, the friend you've neglected, the grandmother you haven't called in a month. You catch yourself and you think, no time for these thoughts, save it for a break. And then on Facebook, that picture of the Pope kissing a terrifyingly disfigured man pops up. He's huddled in the Pope's embrace. The cynic, the rat racer on your left shoulder smirks and says, "What a great PR stunt." But then you keep looking. The disfigured man looks awful. It's the type of thing that might make you cross the street if you saw it in person. And then you realize you just thought of the disfigured man as a thing. The balloon of invincibility is popped once again. You're glad your roommate isn't home because your shirt quickly becomes damp from drying your eyes, and you don't want him to think you were doing anything involving bodily fluids, especially crying. And in that moment, you love the Pope, a better man than you can ever imagine you'll be. In these moments and countless others like it, our feelings are exposed to everyone, and most of all to ourselves. What's unsettling in these moments is the possibility that not everything is a construct, that maybe there are things, including untapped energies within all of us, that point to the transcendent, that maybe some meaning was and is and always will be there long after we're gone. It's almost as if even in our world, we're still haunted, to paraphrase Flannery O'Connor, by the suspicion that we're here for an actual reason, and that reason is equally true for all of us, whether or not we believe it. The thanks we give on Thanksgiving comes and goes. It's already mostly gone, in fact. But we're still here, operating in our broken world as our broken selves. But our lives are filled with moments like these when, if we only stop to listen, the ineffable person inside is asking, however faintly, "Remember me?"
Thank you, Julia. This concludes faith, love, empathy, and virtue. And we now proceed to the next chapter, identity. And with this, I invite Khachatryan to read Deacon's training program in Jerusalem.
I'm Rosan's brother-in-law, so I've known George since he was 6 months old. he observed Aris, John's father, feed John, father. And he said, I always thought that Jewish mothers are the most compassionate and caring until I met Armenian father. I'm a proud father of 3 children and 2 grandchildren, and I'll do everything I can to continue that. That's it. John's legacy. This is an essay that John wrote as a part of the application for Deacon's Psychoacts program in Jerusalem. Intimations of immortality from recollections of early childhood may be William Wordsworth's most insightful and devastating work of poetry. The English Romantic poet begins with an account of what may be his own fall from grace. There was a time when meadow, grave, grove, and steam, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. The glory and the freshness of a dream. It's not now as it is had been of yore. Turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. As children, we are born with capacity to envision the world beyond its material borders. Nature and time are infused with meaning, and imagination allows us, before we have learned much of anything, to begin to grasp the moral dimensions of the universe we inhabit. But this inner awe is not a static characteristic. It's malleable, it's subject to stories and teachings it's exposed to. As children grow up and have to reckon with the sinful world as it is, from rough schoolyard interactions with the bullies to death in their family. As a child of immigrant parents, growing up in New York neighborhood, ethnically diverse and lacking a large Armenian community, Holy Cross Church helped keep this inner knowledge of another world alive when the material world presented countless difficulties. Some of my earliest memories, the ones that explain why Holy Cross has remained the parish, I returned after all these years. I was standing in front of the icon of Sur Astatati and praying to God's help, of shuddering in the pews before communion as the voice from the balcony sang, "Hey, Lord, now," with a haunting beauty convincing me that the angel's tears were deluging Cain at that very moment. And staring out into the incense-filled church while holding Holy Cross as an altar boy. These days were among the most meaningful of the year. Time passed, grandparents passed away, and my family, my parents and I, moved to Kentucky, where there was no Armenian church community. Our Armenian language spoken at home remained the only daily link with what we had left behind. As a teenager at that time, I entered a period when I truly could, quote-unquote, see no more, as Wordsworth says. I did well academically and socially, but I became cognizant that as I moved through the high school, that some key internal part was being left undeveloped. One day, for seemingly no other reason than the movement of Holy Spirit, I drove myself to the closest Catholic church after school and prayed. It was my first time back in church in a couple of years. I was accepted at Yale the year following, where I met wonderful friends with Christian conviction in a university known for its modern secularism, astounded and inspired me. As I pursued my studies in both history, ethics, politics, economics majors, I took classes on church history and theology from beginning of onward. I started attending Catholic Mass with my friends more and more regularly, but Patarak always lingered in my thoughts. Soon, with my parents back in New York, I started commuting to the city for services at Holocaust. I made my best attempt to assist at the parish as much as I could. I also found an Armenian Apostolic parish in nearby Trumbull, Connecticut, where I occasionally attended services when I could not return home. Also, by a movement of grace, I began to sense a desire to understand the divine liturgy line by line and to study the history of the Oriental Orthodox communion. With each passing month, I felt my knowledge growing. The Armenian Church is a gift of endless depth for Armenian people. As we have both spiritual and communal responsibility towards it. The Deacon's training program would, for me, represent a unique opportunity to deepen my understanding of the liturgy for a lifetime serving in the Church. As I enter my last undergraduate year, I must discern among convocations and fields. The program could come at no better time. If accepted, I hope and pray that the program helps me to connect more fully with the Armenian Apostolic Church as a whole and to assist my parish in particular. And on a very personal note, I know that it will continue to nurture me to do that which Woodward says is lost with the closing of childhood, to see more fully.
Thank you, Daron. I now invite Sona Khachatryan to read Will We Remember?
Hello everyone, I am John's second cousin, and I will be reading an excerpt that was published in the Yale Daily News on April 24th in 2013. It's called Will We Remember? My grandmother once observed that my birthday, April 23rd, is wedged every year between two rather unfortunate dates. Vladimir Lenin's birthday, and today, Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. For me, the latter has made for a sobering change of tone each year from the happy day that came before it. But like a death in the family, it doesn't hit you right away. Of course, every year I'd sign petitions demanding that the President issue a statement joining a wide swath of nations and 43 American states in recognizing the Armenian genocide. At home, we watch an old PBS documentary about the genocide. But how does one wrap his head around 1.5 million people having been murdered? What kind of framework can a person, a child no less, apply to make sense of it? How can a kid realize that, were he alive in what is now Eastern Turkey in 1917, he'd like to be an orphan, his mother raped and murdered? But I am perhaps frightfully beginning to comprehend what it was. This year, when I attended a commemoration ceremony at an Armenian church in Trumbull, Connecticut, I heard a rendition of poet Haruish Sevak's The Unsilenceable Buffy. Wheelbarrows became caskets, he wrote. In the evening, I heard an old Armenian church hymn for the first time, Mother, Where Are You? The beautiful haunting chorus sang Christ pleading for his mother during the crucifixion. That Sunday night, for the first time, I could cry about the genocide. When German statesman Willy Brandt went to Warsaw in 1970, he visited a memorial marking the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising to lay a wreath. Then suddenly he knelt. He didn't have to, but he did, and the entire world saw. Here, the Armenian genocide is different, because no Turkish head of state has ever knelt at a monument of the genocide. The Turkish government denies that an event amounting to anything close to genocide took place. Anti-Armenian sentiment extends to the present day as well. Documentary clips about the Armenian genocide on YouTube are often followed by all kinds of comments with ethnic slurs. Obviously, these sentiments don't express the sentiments of nearly all Turkish people, but a strong anti-Armenian cultural strain buttressed by resurgent Turkish nationalism definitely thrives in modern Turkey. and it makes days like today all the more painful, because it begs the question of how to heal an open wound that will not close. How do we remember the dead when few others will? In fact, when some will actually falsify history, directly opposing most historians of the period, to claim that the names of the dead are mere fiction. But the primary source documents are all there for people to see. The late ambassador, Harry Morgenthau Sr., called the Armenian genocide a campaign of race extermination. In justifying the beginning of the Holocaust, Hitler asked a group of Nazis whether anyone remembered the Armenians. But in the end, this is much more than a historical dispute, because it's not really a dispute at all, except for those on the radical fringe. It's a cultural struggle to forgive the crimes of those who didn't acknowledge, and whose descendants still don't, that they have anything for which to be forgiven. Whether we will remember is an open question. I will, haunted by the faces of the genocides of the 20th century. And tonight, I'll accompany my friends to the women's table, where we'll remember together. We will forget politics, and we will remember the child marched into the desert by the Ottomans, stripped of a family and a home, crying out for his mother, and we will try our very hardest to forgive.
Thank you, Sana. We have two more readings. I invite Anait Sarkisian, member of the Board of Bruce Foundation, and also Director of Outreach, to read John's personal statements for the Oxford Armenian Classical Studies National Program.
Thank you, Stefan. My name is Anait Sarkisian. As Stefan said, I'm a board member at the Bruce Foundation and the Director of Outreach. I did not know John personally, but I feel like I did hear and recognize his voice through the commitment letters of the Bruce Foundation's John Aroutiounian Scholarship Program applicants. And today, after meeting his family members and after hearing from John directly, I am filled with such inspiration that our nation has produced an individual of this caliber, and it's an honor for me to read this excerpt from his application, his personal statement to Oxford Armenian Classical Studies Master's Program. This was written in May of 2016, and John will go on to receive a degree from Oxford in 2017. As fixed on the characters just above the altar, I squint, as if the problem is merely one of poor vision instead of comprehension. One letter appears to be an elongated English R. This realization triggers photographic memories of a chalkboard from years ago, on which the Armenian equivalents of letter A and B are scrawled in the Sunday school teacher's elegant handwriting. I scanned the chalkboard in my mind ferociously for more letters, but they're not there. 3 letters, not even enough to piece together one word. This was a recurring predicament until only 3 years ago. I had heard and spoken fluent Eastern Armenian at home all my life, but remained illiterate in the language until my junior year at Yale University, when, in between classes or for a few minutes each night before sleep, I began to teach myself written Armenian. Around this time, I also began serving as an acolyte in the Armenian church parish of my youth, lighting a slow-burning yet increasingly indefatigable desire to unlock the meanings of some shotagans beyond the unconvincing English translations. And yet this sung language, classical Armenian, was thoroughly mysterious. Not only was the script uncomprehensible, but most of the songs and words were too. The chasm between modern Italian and scholastical Latin serves as a useful, if rather imperfect, analogy. Yet, at the time, the chasm between my Armenian and that of the church decans felt as large, if not larger. But the determination to grasp this almost foreign-sounding tongue, and with it, the keys to the medieval world of Bagratite kingdom of Aspirations, of Queen Melitete of Jerusalem, of the Hethamites and the Cilician Armenia at the shores of the Mediterranean, had already been firmly established. Armenian youth are told since infancy that they belong to a civilization that has survived amidst invasions, wars, and genocide. They are told of the masters who produced the highest forms of Armenian intellectual expression, art, music, philosophy, literature, and theology. But, unfortunately, few young people in the diaspora have the tools with which to access much of these treasures. As I swung the turtle in the altar over 2 years ago, I resolved that I would not leave this privation. I would find a way to probably claim my cultural inheritance. 2 years, 2 trips to Armenia, and 1 pilgrimage to the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem later, my Armenian reading and writing skills in both Eastern and Western dialects have improved dramatically. I read daily and continue progression in spelling and the pace of reading. I now seek to develop a stronger comprehension of classical Armenian grammar and syntax beyond solely the divine liturgy of Armenian Church, in which I continue to work. I am particularly interested in forming a deeper bond with the mystical Book of Lamentations and the broader works of Grigori Agnatic, the 10th century Armenian saint who in 2015 was made a doctor of Universal Church by Pope Francis. Joining only 35 others throughout time and becoming the first non-Catholic to receive this title. There is a dearth of accessible literature on St. Gregory in the West, and I hope to become one of the rising scholars who will fill the void in a time of renewed interest in the value of St. Gregory's writings. I am also interested in advanced research into the political and religious activities of Cilician King Khetov II and Leo IV, especially in relation to efforts aimed at the unification of Armenian Apostolic and Roman Catholic churches after the Crusades, and the nature of the religious and political resistance that they encountered. Thank you.
Thank you, Vahe. I will conclude the readings with an excerpt from John's letter to the Very Reverend Father Daniel Deacon, introducing the Israel Ori Institute, which he established in 2018. The letter is titled, Israel Ori Institute, Defining Strategic Objectives for Armenia's Future and Regional Security. Dear Father Deacon, in 1704, Israel Ori, a pioneer of the Armenian national movement, born of noble stock in Armenia's rugged Sunnite region, arrived in Rome to petition Pope Clement XI to adopt an ambitious plan for the liberation of Armenia from Ottoman and Persian rule. This was neither the first nor the last of his efforts. Over several decades, Ori tirelessly lobbied royal courts throughout Europe and Russia, including that of Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, French King Louis XIV, and Russian Emperor Peter the Great to assist in the cause of Armenian liberation. He obtained promises and little else for his Armenia plan, but his lifelong effort inspired another visionary, Joseph Emini, and the scores of future heroes. In 1991, for the first time since the fall of the Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia in 1375, Ori's dream was finally achieved. A quarter century after independence, Armenia stands at a crossroads. In the last few weeks and months, the Armenian nation has stumbled upon a newfound remarkable sense of hope, but the challenges remain enormous. Endemic corruption in politics and business, grossly insufficient infrastructure, poor healthcare and life expectancy, dangerously low birth rates, few educational opportunities for Armenians outside the capital, and most importantly, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and the ongoing security threats from totalitarian Azerbaijan and denialist Turkey. All this Armenia must grapple with on a daily basis, with dormant concerns involving Iran, Russia, the Greater Middle East, the United States, and two competing unions, the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union, constantly lurking at a stone's throw. With the dawn of a new era in Armenian civic dialogue, the need is more acute than ever for a sober, comprehensive conversation involving the entire Armenian nation, in Armenia and across the diaspora, alongside those individuals and regional players with an interest in regional security and lasting peace. It is time for a new Armenia plan that encompasses the entire region's dreams for stability, prosperity, and coexistence. This is the mission of the Israel Ali Institute, to provide a forum for a new conversation between various perspectives, individuals, and institutional actors. No view will be excluded from publication, whether from current or former members of government, partisans, clergy, academics, activists, journalists, nonprofit organizers, or individuals, Armenian or otherwise. The Institute espouses no ideology or affiliation with any party, government, or group. Its sole interest is the continued development of the Armenian nation along peaceful democratic lines that serve as an example for both East and West. There will be three central eligibility criteria for publication in the Israel Ali Institute media: rigorous research, civility and discourse, and an earnest desire to engage in dialogue and debate with fellow contributors. A call for the initial round of contributions to the website will be forthcoming in the weeks ahead. John then goes on to list the priorities of the Institute, which include shining light on strategic issues, bridging the gap between priorities in the Republic of Armenia and the diaspora, engaging and educating youth, raising awareness of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and probing novel ways for addressing the injustice of the Armenian genocide, and also pressing international organizations for this purpose. He ends his letter with the following paragraph. We stand at the forefront of incredible developments in a globalized, interconnected world. We have already seen the potential of the revolutions in communication and organization actualized in movements across the planet. These changes, if harnessed correctly, have the impact to radically improve lives for billions. Armenia, with a population of 3 million and a diaspora of 8 million, must not let such an opportunity to strengthen and safeguard the future go to waste. We have an urgent mission to re-engage Armenians and interested parties everywhere to define 21st century objectives for a peaceful and prosperous future in the Caucasus and beyond. We hope you will join us. Yours sincerely, John Aroutiounian, Executive Director. John would pen many similar such letters to other prominent Armenian American intellectuals as well. And as was mentioned several times during this afternoon, this letter too sounds more true than ever before. This is very important for us today, as it was before, even more so. With this, we conclude this afternoon's event. We would like to end with a collective singing of the song Khachatryan. Of course.
They were very close. She didn't prepare, but she wants to discuss it.
Jackie, Amina, Barkev, Aingin, Barkev, Chikna, Barkev, Shabal. This woman şurakalısını haydi. İmruzanın. Bunda kalarsa İstanbul Viştan. Daslet Jolin Hanasana. Yevupes Hayeli Dasa. Aduçam. Girdim. Mıtsene lastin sasas. Kınelek. Bana hedef John Çöpette bana anlakat. John Çöpette sana şu yaşlarım. Ben bolu Çöpette giden John Çöpette bana haber. Muhammad. Yev işbisi bata sanatçı çambe batanın bu kümüsüne kalışetto antolog asasına kalışın imhasa geliyor bana yötanasın ut motora peşmetanasın yok yötanasın ne yapıyorsun yötanasın yekelim yötanasın yetusun anselep sizine Yale Federalist şurakalın zeranet şuret hasakun etpestatasannesi asasi iz şurakalliye et şurakalısın uğrakilim anlamam torliki. Böyle neymiş fantastik.
John Khachatryan պատրաստել էր իրեն տատիկին քաղաքացիության քննություն անցնելու համար, այլ նաև Ջոնը եղավ իրեն տատիկի կնքահայրը եւ կնքեց եկեղեցիով իրեն ոչ կնքված կապը։
Ստուգացել հավես գարունքի բան